vocês a cada palavra de amor que falar.
Pai nosso, que estás no céu, santificado seja o vosso nome. Venha a nós o vosso reino, seja feita a vossa vontade, assim na terra como no céu, assim na terra como no céu. O pão nosso de cada dia dai-nos hoje, ó Senhor. Perdoai as nossas dívidas, assim como perdoamos aos nossos devedores. Não deixeis cair em tentação, mas livrai-nos de todo o mal. Não deixeis cair em tentação, mas livrai-nos de todo o mal.
Everyone, welcome back to another series of talks promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation. Today we have a very special guest as well. We have FLAVIO ZANETTI that is going to be talking to us about well-being through forgiveness, a Spiritist perspective. But before we introduce FLAVIO, we always start with our prayer. So we would like to invite you all to join us in thoughts, in hearts, so that we can say our prayer. And we elevate our thoughts to our Heavenly Creator, asking for guidance and protection, that we may, through this work, learn the importance of forgiving, the importance of embracing each other, to live more in fraternity. We ask for the blessings of the On High and for the protection of the benefactors that have been guiding us in this work. Amen. Okay, so let's go, Flavio. Hello, Flavio. How are you doing today?
I'm well, Jussar. How are you? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone.
Yeah, beautiful day, a sunny day here in New York. But very cold. Very cold.
Yes, some snow yesterday. 4 or 5 inches.
Oh my gosh,
yep.
That's
beautiful New England.
Yeah, New England. That's the case. I think I can see some in your behind here in your
I
window.
Can see a little white. You know, the trees are covered in white. So, yep.
Yeah, and happy Halloween for you and all your girls and everyone, okay? So let me introduce Flavio. Flavio ZANETTI is an avid Spiritist student and tireless worker and speaker for the Spiritist movement in the United States and abroad. He worked in different positions for the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Massachusetts, acted as the program's director for the United States Spiritist Federation, translate books, articles, and course materials for the Spiritist magazine and various other publications, and helps as simultaneous translator for Spiritist events nationwide. He's the General Secretary for the Spiritist Family Retreat since its inception. He holds 2 Bachelor's Science in Engineering and Arts and Sociology and a Master's in International Management and Business Operations. Professionally, he is the head of strategy and planning for a multinational telecommunications company. He lives in Boston with his wife and their 2 beautiful 8-year-old twin daughters. Okay, Flavio, now it's with you. Thank you so much for being with us here today, okay?
Thank you so much, Sarah, and for the warm welcome. It's a pleasure. It's a joy, a moment of joy to really gather amongst friends here. We have a very special topic that we're going to cover this morning. For those of you following us live, for those of you who are going to follow us later on, right? Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, wherever you may be. And what we're going to be covering here is really an approach or a Spiritist perspective on forgiveness, right? And the topic is forgive more and live better. But before we start, we also like to keep our thoughts raised to our really higher spirits. May they be with us, right? At this moment, really embracing our hearts, bring our minds to peace, and really helping us really achieve or gather the knowledge or the wisdom that's really being brought to us by Jesus' gospel, right? By the way that we look at the Jesus gospel through the lens of Spiritism. So, forgive more and live better. Notice that I didn't really say forgive more and live healthier, or forgive more and live more peaceful lives, right? So this idea that the hypothesis or the idea that we're building this morning around forgiveness and better lives, right? So what is it to live better? What is well-being, right? Can we translate forgiveness with well-being? Can we translate forgiveness with happiness? If you look at the definition of well-being, it's this state of being happy, healthy, prosperous, right? It's really understand the way that you look at our lives with this dynamics of everything that it's in its place, right? So we have, a life, a situation, a position, a place that we live in society, and everything seems to be in their places, right? This is the whole idea of well-being. Well-being when it comes to our health, well-being when it comes to our, our possessions, our professions, our work, our family, our friends, our churches, our Spiritist center, whatever it is, every institution that is part of our lives, right? We consider that relationship healthy, right? And that's really the idea of well-being through forgiveness, meaning the more we forgive, the better we become, folks, right? And this is the argument that I'm raising this morning. So let me just define forgiveness so we all, are starting from the same, a starting point, right? So forgiveness is the act of giving pardon for a remission or an offense, right? A debt. So really to absolve a debt, right? It's to give up all the claim or an account of, or to really seek for revenge and all those things, to seize all those resentments that sometimes we feel when somebody does, or somebody, provides something that we're not really think it's fair, right? And then if we can really tie the word forgiveness with its etymological, meaning, right? For plus give, right? Or from Latin, perdonare, which means to give beyond, right? To give back beyond what we were given, right? So really to forgive, it's to donate ourselves beyond what we're capable of, right? That's the whole idea or the whole meaning of forgiveness. So let me move on here with the story so we can start with an example, right? So allow me to share with you a story that happened right in the beginning of the 20th century, right? And this is what we know the history talks to us. It was the very first genocide in human history, where 1.5, approximately 1.5 million Armenian people were decimated by the Ottoman Empire, right? So some folks even call it the Armenian Holocaust, right? Or the Armenian Holocaust. So the story goes somewhere along the lines, there was this captain of the Turkish army who was really trying to conquer different lands, who was really, moving beyond Turkish borders by then and going into Armenia. And really, in this particular example, he goes up to the mountain, a very important mountain, and there used to live a family of two, a countryman, a couple, right, and their two daughters. And when this captain really enters that couple's house, they see that couple who used to be workers from the land, right? Used to be folks that used to really cultivate the land. But there was a very strategic position for the Turkish Empire to have good visibility, right, into the overall valley, right? That they were, making strides towards conquering, Armenia, right, back then. So in this situation, the captain made, atrocities in that family. He entered their house. He looked at the couple without even paying attention to what they were doing and everything else. They just, killed their couple, right, point blank, right? They raped one of the daughters, right, and she ended up getting killed, right? And then the other daughter, they threw that to the soldiers who abused her. And then because she was still alive, he took her to be his sexual slave for, 5+ more years after that. Eventually, that young lady, the young woman, was able to escape from the oppression of that captain. And as she escaped, she continued on her life, right? She came across Christianity. She came across Jesus' teachings, and then she became a nurse. She went to school, nursing school, to really, help others and have a profession, right? So fast forward, a few more years, the war was almost coming to an end, and then she was working in this very, prominent hospital, right, where we know today is, Istanbul. And in this hospital, right, one of the generals that comes in with a lot of wounds. He was very injured. He was really injured in the battle. And he comes with a lot of ulcers in his body, all over his body. A lot of these ulcers were in very, decomposition state already. He was in really bad shape. We can see that, right? Then when he enters the hospital, they talk to the nurse practitioner or the chief nurse of the hospital. The army asking, we need somebody that can really take care of him almost 24 hours a day, because if not, the general's going to die, right? They argue with the chief nurse. And she said, I have the right person in mind. She's the most caring nurse that we have here, and I'm sure she'll do a great job for you, sir, or for the general here. So fast forward, that nurse, the very same young lady, starts taking care of him. Takes care of him to a condition that, it's the best possible condition, that what the folks thought would have caused him to really pass away, she was able to reverse the situation and really take good care of him for the next few months, to the point that he was fully recovered. She almost lived in a hospital side by side to the general to make sure that he had all the care that he needed to not really succumb to the injuries. Fast forward to a few months, right? The general is almost getting dismissal from the hospital. He goes to the nurse, the chief nurse, and says, nurse, I'd like to thank you, because without the care of this hospital, I wouldn't be alive, right? And then the chief nurse said, well, don't thank me. You should thank so-and-so, because she was the one that helped you, right, recover from all your injuries, because you were in really bad shape, as you can imagine, right? So let me talk to her, he asked. And then he goes to talk to her, and then he found her, and then they start talking.
Hey, we lost the sound of Flavio. Yeah, please forgive us. We are having a technical problem, and we told you he works in telecommunications. So if there is someone that is going to solve this problem, certainly it's Flavio. So the best thing now is actually for him to restart and come back again.
Let's try this again. Can you guys?
Okay, welcome back.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
I just saw a note that says you're being disconnected. So, what happened?
Yeah.
So, anyways, following back to the story. Apologize for the technical difficulties there, folks. So, when the general now comes to thank the nurse, they start having a conversation, and then she really realizes that of course, the voice comes back to him. Her voice comes back to him, and he realizes, oh, have we met before? And then she goes, yes, sir, we have. Before you came to the hospital, we have met. And then her tone of voice really pushed him back all the way to that event, that atrocious event that he had committed. And then he asked her, why did you keep me alive? Why did you just let me die? And she answered very eloquently, right? Opening her arms, saying, because that one that I follow, right, Jesus, told me to forgive no matter what. I'm going to repeat that, right? Because the one who I follow, right, making, a gesture to Jesus, right, told me to forgive no matter what. So, folks, here we have a very, a strong example of an unconditional forgiveness, which, by the way, the Pastor Brian Zand describes that very well in this book called Unconditional or Radical Forgiveness, right? The call of Jesus to radical forgiveness. And, of course, when we look at an example like this, okay, what is he telling us? What is he asking us to do? Should we wait until a very difficult situation like that happens to our lives for us to forgive? Is that the call to action here? No, of course not, right? The call to action is a lot simpler than that. It's for us to really pay attention to the message that we got from Jesus, right? So, for example, as he asked us, that's in Matthew chapter 5, verse 48, for if you forgive humans, right, man, their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive man their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. So the call to action here is, folks, we're all going to make mistakes in our lives, right? Nobody's perfect. We're all going to be at the receiving end of forgiveness, one way or the other. So the call to action here is we have to forgive, because eventually we also need forgiveness. And if we really wanted to be forgiven, once we slipped or once we dropped some balls here and there, we must forgive, no matter what. Okay, Flavio, I know, I get it, but how can I forgive when it hurts so much? I get it. I mean, this is true, right? So, for example, when somebody provides or really commits a wrongdoing to us, and we have that feeling, I mean, it hurts. Of course it hurts. I can't even fathom to come across, to really realize what the nurse has gone through as a young woman. Okay? I can't even imagine what she felt. But what I can see and I can learn from the story is that thanks to radical forgiveness, thanks to unconditional forgiveness, she was able to twist her life around. She was really able to position herself into a better place. Because one thing that most people have misconceptions about forgiveness. People think that forgiveness is for the benefit of those who commit wrongdoings. No, folks, that's not the case. When we forgive, the benefits for us. Why? Because every time we have, revenge or feelings of revenge, of resentment, all those things, we have that toxic blame, right? The resentment that really inflicts emotional damage to ourselves. And it's definitely not okay, right? We continue to be stuck on the pain of the emotions of that situation that doesn't really go away. It stays in our hearts and minds and emotions. It stays there as if we're living. And I believe a lot of folks know this, but I'll share anyways. Forgive me if I'm oversharing here, but every time we remember something, our brains don't know if we're living that or we're just remembering it. So it's as if we're living through that again. And every time we have that sentiment of revenge, of resentment, guess what? It's as if we're living that situation again. Once again, in the example of the nurse, she was able to forgive him and continue with her life. She was always remembering that situation. Note that she did not forget the situation. She was not with that situation really vivid every day, all the time in her head, right? Causing emotion, pain, frustrations, right? And all these things. So when you look at that, and then maybe just a double click on revenge by itself, right? So every time we don't forgive, I think it's important to mention the opposite of it. So when we don't forgive, the right opposite of that is we seek revenge. And every time we seek revenge, why does that happen? Why is it even part of the cycle? So this author here, Dr. Brian Adams, he argues that everybody feels a slight, minimum, a slight, feeling of revenge when something does something back to us. How come so-and-so did this to me? How come she was, how come? So we have this question because we understand, here's the checklist that he argues from this book, because the person understands that some harm or hurt was inflicted. In the case of the nurse, he killed my parents. He killed my sister. He raped me. Yes, he did that, amongst a lot of other things. But at the end of the day, right, most people that are still stuck in revenge, they conclude that, of course, it was caused by somebody else, and that they believe, or we believe, that the harm was not just. How could he do that to me? I'm such a nice guy. How could he do that to her? She was such a nice woman and all that. And finally, that person feels the desire to retaliate, meaning to seek revenge. So these cycles are common, folks. They are going to happen. The key here is to understand the cycles, the steps, and intervene or interject before the desire to retaliate translates itself into actions of retaliation. Because let's go back, right? Let's go back to what we learned from the gospel. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. So if we don't offer mercy, if we don't offer indulgence, if we don't offer that what Jesus told us to do, we're not following him. We're not being truly Christians or Spiritists or Christ followers if we don't really act in the way that he asked us to act. So, for example, in this situation, a little more color to the scriptures or the text. In this passage, Matthew explains some situations where disciples were dealing with wrongdoings in the church. People were making the church, not this place of gathering for folks to learn more about the gospel, the teachings. No, they were making the church. They were selling things in the church. They were doing all sorts of things that were against what Jesus asked them to do. So Matthew was, come on, we can't do this, right? And then he asks, right, Jesus, what do we do here? Because look at these guys. There are a lot of wrongdoings. I see them. They're causing, frustrations. They're causing, again, folks were making a different sense of the whole idea of gathering to learn the gospel. And then, of course, Jesus answered very eloquently by really challenging Matthew's perception, really asking him to think critically. And he says, I quote, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. So Jesus is saying, I get it, but if somebody's doing something to you individually, go and talk to him. So-and-so, what you did hurt my feelings. So-and-so, what you did made me drove some frustrations in me, made me frustrated. What you did really caused a pain. What you did, explain how you felt to that individual. And then, if you are the ones doing that, right, ask for forgiveness. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to say this, and I did. I apologize. Hope you can forgive me. I'd love to move on. Again, try to have a conversation in a way that, yes, we're all the same. We're all making mistakes here and there. But the key to this teaching comes at the end, when Peter asked Jesus and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Meaning, how many times do I have to forgive? That's the question. Because in the event like this happening, that happening, all these things, how many times do I have to wait until so-and-so does something bad to me and I have to forgive? And Jesus answered very, very specifically, right? I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 77 times. And if you look at the symbology of the number 7 in Judaism, which really means the whole 7 days in a week, 7, stages until the world, or, the universe was created. Again, the idea of the number 7 means totality. And then Jesus go even beyond to say, you know what? Even beyond totality, we have to forgive. In the example of the nurse, that we absolutely have to forgive. That's the call to action, right? That's what he's asking us, folks. You have to forgive because we're all together on this. If you expect somebody to forgive you later, if you expect we got to do our part now because we're all in this together. That's the message behind the scriptures here. So I get it, Flavio. I get it. Forgiveness, but it's what's the difference between forgive and forget? How do we tell the difference between forgive and forget? Let's go back to the nurse again. Example. Does anyone here think that she's going to forget that situation? No, it's impossible to forget. Correct? It's impossible, right? That's why forgiveness and forgetfulness are two separate things. When we forget small things. We forget sometimes our keys at the countertop. We forget to buy coffee from the grocery store. We forget, that's simple. But when something that harsh happens to us, it's impossible to forget. That's why science tells us right now that's biologically impossible to forget. So don't try to forget things that happen to you because it just doesn't happen. For example, if you are a worker and then one of your colleagues sleeps in the job and the machine just cuts one of your fingers or one of your arms, are you going to forget that? No, you're never going to forget that. But it's possible for you to forgive that individual. For whatever reason, it's possible to forgive. Exactly why or how the nurse did. So once again, the forgiveness really benefits all of us who forgive because it gives us that peace of mind, that emotional balance that's so hard to find these days. And as Joanna the Angelus, the spirit guide, talks about mental clarity. And mental clarity, if you look at the psychological definition of that, it's that state of emotional and psychological well-being in which a person is able to use his or her cognitive and emotional capabilities in order to function in society and also meet all the needs from an everyday life. Meaning, without mental clarity, we can't function as human beings, folks. We can't function. We can't really operate with our own commitments, with our own duties, our own right. We just can't make sense of things. And if we don't forgive, that impacts our mental clarity. Because as opposed to really looking at our responsibilities, we're going to go back and be stuck in that situation where we did not forgive. Did you find the connection there? So the more we forgive, the more mental clarity, emotional balance, and peace of mind are going to be present in our lives. That's the message that Joanna the Angelus suggests. Well, let's fast forward to 2020, which has been a very difficult year, very challenging for many, many reasons. And there's something that I like to bring, which is the idea or the concept that forgiveness sometimes is seen as a weakness. Why did you forgive him? Are you weak? You shouldn't do that. You should just go back and tell why you. So there's a difference between trying to come to grips or trying to really make sense of the situation, expressing one's emotions, frustrations, everything else, versus being or seeing forgiveness as an act of weakness. Allow me to explain by leveraging or by using, one of the texts that the Spirit Emmanuel brings us. Folks, it's important to mention that we're not always the real victims. Let me repeat that. We're not always the real victims. We may have induced others through some unclear behaviors to act against us. Therefore, turning us to the courts of divine justice as being the real authors of such crimes that we undoubtedly lament committing. It's like when if you're a parent or if you have kids around you, one of your kids comes to you and says, Daddy, so-and-so just did something to me. Oh, really, my dear? Can you tell me what happened? What was the situation? What did you do to her so she would do something like this to you? That's the first question that we ask to our kids. Fast forward to us as adults. But remember, we're still kids in our spiritual, evolution. Meaning, from a moral evolution, spiritual evolution, we're still not there yet. Everybody agrees, right? We still have a long way to go. And if we are not there yet, we're acting as if we see our children acting. right? Meaning, we may have done something to that person, so that person committed something to us. Of course, in the example of the nurse, we don't know. But then thanks to Spiritism, that explains to us the present and the past causes of afflictions. Meaning, everything that happens to us, there's a reason. Or as Albert Einstein used to say, God doesn't play dice. I'm sure folks will agree with that nothing happens by quote-unquote accident or by mistake. Meaning, if we're in that situation, there's something to be learned from that situation. So we may have, in the past, either this life or a previous one, may have induced others to commit those things. We may have a portion of responsibilities there, portion of responsibility there that may have induced others to do these things to us. So we've got to look into that with a different perspective. And you're going beyond, if tomorrow we were in that person's shoes, how can we guarantee we would not be doing this exact same thing as that person did? And even beyond, if we did, wouldn't we like to be forgiven? I believe we are. I believe we do. And by willing or by really expecting that forgiveness, we must absolutely forgive folks. And that's why there's an intrinsic power of forgiveness that most people don't realize. When it comes to that power of forgiveness, then there's much more than just a benefit for those of us forgiven. Yes, it's there. There's a benefit of that. There are healing effects of forgiveness. Forgiveness is connected to our moral and spiritual progress, as we mentioned. The importance of forgiveness goes beyond the realms of spirituality and religion alone. And that's why we're going to really look into the next couple of slides here. Let me start by suggesting or by asking, right? If we don't forgive, what happens? We carry that baggage of bitterness that's very toxic. And that's the study that this medical doctor, Dr. Fred Luskin, has done. His research was done between 1997 and 2002. So 5 years of study, over 2,000 patients. This book was published in 2003. It's still a bestseller. And he really talks about a proven prescription for health and happiness, which is forgiveness. The more we forgive, the healthier we live. For example, he even concludes in his research, 70% decrease in the feelings of emotional hurt, 13% decrease in long-term anger, 27% decrease in physical stress symptoms like headaches, backaches, sleeplessness, upset stomach, and a couple of others. 34% increase in goodwill towards the offender. So, folks, he's arguing here that there's a huge benefit, huge medical benefit of forgiveness. There's a connection between health and forgiveness. The more we forgive, the healthier lives we live. That's exactly what he's suggesting. So, that suggestion is an interesting one because most people don't see it. So, Flavio, you're telling me that the more I forgive, the healthier I'm going to live? Yes. The more we forgive, the healthier lives we are going to live. That's what this Stand for Forgiveness program or research talks to us about. So there's a huge benefit of forgiveness with our health, with the health of our bodies and so forth. Remember, the beginning, our hypothesis was the more we forgive, as we learn forgiveness, the more we forgive, we're going to live. It's going to really drive more well-being. And well-being, when it comes to forgiveness, or when it comes to a health to our own physical bodies. That's exactly what Dr. Luskin is here suggesting. Okay? So, a little more on that. There's another research that was published by Harvard Medical School. This one was published by Dr. Benson. And it's a very interesting one because he uses the opposite component of Dr. Luskin, meaning he studies resentment, which is the opposite of forgiveness. The more we feel the resentment and hatred, look at that. It's really associated with many cardiovascular problems. For example, high blood pressure, obesity, and we can name a few, right? So he connects the power of biology, of belief, the power of really our bodies responding to an act that was originating in our minds. And he really suggests that there's healing through forgiveness. Because as forgiveness reduces anger and stress, remember, 60 to 90% of our physician visits are stress-related ones. Meaning, if we can reduce that, imagine 60 to 90%, folks. More than half, at least more than half of our doctor visits happen because of stress, because of anger, because of these imbalances that came from us not forgiving others. This is the study that Dr. Benson really put together. He was he actually founded a program at Harvard Medical School in partnership with the Massachusetts General Hospital called the Mind-Body Institute, or the Body-Mind Institute, one of the two. The Body-Mind Institute that really talks about like integral medicine, how our actions, our emotions are really connected with our well-being and everything, right? So this book was written a few years ago, but it's the same message that we learned from Spiritism, who has been with us for over 160 years. So interesting, component there that we learned this through Spiritism. We've been learning this through Spiritism and to a large extent after Jesus' message, but we still don't pay attention to it. We still don't allow forgiveness to enter our lives. We still don't open the doors of forgiveness so we can come out of the situation better. So I invite all of you, all of us, to look at forgiveness with a different perspective, with a different mindset. A mindset that, yes, we are going to benefit. With the mindset that says, yes, we're going to be the benefactors, right? The beneficiaries, rather, of forgiving others. But it's important that we do that no matter what happens to us. In the smallest things or littlest things, all the way up to the biggest things, like in the situation of the Armenian nurse. And my invitation for us to look at forgiveness with this different approach, I'd like to bring another story that I think it's a very interesting one. I have shared this before in other talks and seminars. I've had the pleasure to meet Mr. Cotton in person. And the story goes some way along the lines. Mr. Cotton was a young black man living in the South in Burlington, North Carolina. And he was coming back. He was a baker. He was coming back from his third graveyard shift. He used to work from 11 to 5. So he was coming back from work, walking back to his house, when the police arrested him. So the police arrested him, cuffed him, put him back of the car, and took him to the station. And he was booked by raping Jennifer Cotton, and a crime that he did not commit. A crime that he did not commit. So he was sent to jail, right, for a crime that he did not commit. Let's put ourselves in Ron Cotton's shoes. You're coming back home. You're a law-abiding citizen. You have your work, you have your family. You're coming back home to rest. You get arrested for something that it's totally unknown to you. Okay? So fast forward to the trial. He's sentenced to life in prison. This is back in 1984, folks. We still see a lot of these situations happening in 2020. But this one in particular happened in 1984. I'd love to bring this to your attention. He's sent to life in prison. He starts serving his sentence, and his father, who was a pastor in the local ministry, visits him every week, visits him and talks to him and all that. And then Ronald, trying to really make sense of the situation, still very unreal or surreal to him, almost like a nightmare, He's trying to make sense of the situation. And then he starts to get more, interested in this overall process, how he was incriminated, understands how this, criminal justice system works and all that. And then, in the midst of all that, he sees the person, the perpetrator, that had committed the rape. He was in jail for a different crime. And that person makes fun of Ronald. It's like, yeah, you're a loser. You're there because of me, right? Making fun of Ronald's situation. Ronald, of course, gets really aggravated. And the first sentiment is, I gotta retaliate. I gotta kill this guy because I'm not gonna leave prison, for the rest of my life. And he's there for a petty crime as opposed to for the rape that he committed. Ronald talks to other inmates and ends up buying a shank or a knife, as it's called in prison slang. So he bought a shank, and then he asks his father to come talk to him. His father comes talk to him and says, Ronald, what's going on? How you doing? I feel a little distress in the way you look. He says, Father, I found the perpetrator who really raped Jennifer, and I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill that bastard. Right? He uses expletive words there. And his father goes, no, don't do that. Don't do it because I don't understand the situation, but God must have a plan for this criminal injustice. Notice the words that his father pronounced. God must have a plan for this criminal injustice. And tries to really bring some sense to Ronald's mind to the point that he goes, you know what? I'm not a criminal. I didn't rape Jennifer. The only way out here is through the courts. It's through asking for a new trial. So he goes, asks for a new trial, appeals the conviction. He then gets a new trial. He goes to a new trial, and there's a lot of weird things happening. The police falsify some documents, and again, a lot of issues happen in the trial, as opposed to him being freed from a crime that he did not commit. He gets the death penalty. He's sentenced to be executed by the state of North Carolina. And then, almost like a cold water shower happened. He's really, totally collapsed. His father, once again, Ronald, remember, God must have a plan for this. Don't lose hope. Don't ever lose hope. Because Jesus that we follow is always by our side. Jesus, as we know him, is here with us. He wants you to live a law-abiding life. He wants you to forgive. He wants you, and it keeps giving almost like a sermon to his son in prison, waiting to be executed. Okay? So, we fast forward 12 years. Ronald was finally freed from the accusation, thanks to the DNA, evidence, thanks to the Innocence Project, which is a nonprofit that really tries to find wrongdoings in the criminal justice system, and he gets exonerated. Ronald gets exonerated, and the first thing that he says to his lawyer, I would love to meet Jennifer. His lawyer goes, well, why do you want to meet her? She was the one who put you in that situation. I want to meet her because from what I understood, she was a young woman. She was by herself in her apartment. She was in college back then. She didn't really know much about the situation. And she was forced to pick me in the lineup, and I ended up being incriminated. I want to just talk to her. I want to hear from her what really happened. Because I've only heard from the courts, not from the person that all that pain. I can imagine the pain that she suffered when that happened. So Jennifer, also would like to meet him. And then her lawyer said, no, I don't think it's a good idea. You took 12 years of the guy's life. Of course, you didn't intend to, but this is what happened. I don't believe it's right. So both lawyers did not want them to meet. Both lawyers said, no, that's not a good idea. But, so you know what? I respect your wish. So they really scheduled for that meeting. And in that meeting, they met in a neutral place. And when they saw each other, a compulsive emotion starts to fill both of them up, that they really couldn't contain themselves. And they just went and hugged each other. And they hugged each other, folks, for 21 minutes. They hugged each other for 21 minutes. When was the last time you hugged someone for 21 seconds? When was the last time we hugged someone for 21 seconds? They hugged each other for 21 minutes. And tears start to drop, emotions, and they start to really make sense of the situation. Ronald forgave her. She had no idea what she was doing. Of course, she went through a lot of difficulties. And if we fast forward to today, look where they are. Look where they are today. They've become best friends. Ronald godfathered Jennifer's third kid. She had married before. She used to be called Jennifer Thompson. She's now called Jennifer Thompson Canino. Ronald is the godfather of her third child. They've become very good friends. They live about 40 minutes from each other in North Carolina. And they go all over the world talking against death penalties or against death penalty. If you look at them at 60 Minutes, this is the book that they tell their story. It's going to become a movie now. They're shooting a movie, I believe, this year, next year. And they go all over the world really talking about the implications of death penalty and how that affects us. So when you look at that, I bring Ronald's father's quote once again. God must have a plan for this criminal injustice. We don't know, folks, the realities or the intricacies of our lives. We don't know. We don't know. What we know is what Jesus has asked us to do, which is this unconditional, constant, and indistinct forgiveness, which is really the responsible for our mental health and mental balance. And if I can fast forward even a little more, we learned through Spiritism that forgiveness is the best vaccine. It's the best peace formula. It really generates the greatest benefit for all of us. And then, of course, the argument or the thesis, or I should say, the idea here is that the more we forgive others, we will live a more balanced, healthier, and happier life. I'll repeat that. The more we forgive others, we will live a more balanced, healthier, and happier lives. I hope this has been helpful for us to really remove the idea of forgiveness and really a call to action for us to look at forgiveness not just as a weak sentiment, no, not just as, hey, I'm going to forgive because I have no option. Yes, we have a lot of options. We have free will, but thanks to Spiritism, thanks to science, thanks to all this study, all the research that these folks that I've shared here before have done before us, we have better ideas of the benefits of forgiveness and how much that contributes to our overall well-being. Thank you, folks, for your attention. I think we have some time for some Q&A. Back to you, Josiah.
Hi, thank you so much, Flavio. That's what's really a lot of food for thought. I think this is a struggle that we have in terms of, learning about the importance of forgiveness, understanding how much this can impact us. And it is important as well that you brought not only the perspective of from a spiritual perspective, right? You didn't only mention that, but the scientific perspective, because as we know, many people do not pay that much attention to spiritual things, but at least we have to pay attention to science, and science is showing that. And I mean, the well-being, the emotional balance, psychological balance, and so if only for that, we should already start thinking about contemplating, reviewing our emotions and see what we have bottled down, because I think there are many things that we have here that we are not paying attention to, and we should. But yes, thank you so much. Let's go. We have for the questions now, we have a few questions. The first one, how can we, how can we conciliate God's justice with the human being's justice?
So they're separate things, but they're connected, meaning divine, I call divine justice and human justice. Human justice is a mirror or an interpretation of divine justice. Human justice only looks at the situation with our own physical eyes. Divine justice looks at that situation with broader eyes, with implications from this life, from previous lives, and so forth. That's why I suggested or argued on the talk that we're not always the real victims. Sometimes we have done even worse for that individual. So we got to really think about that. That really conciliates or really connects the current or the present and the past causes of affliction. So it's really important to differentiate them. Of course, divine justice sees much, much broader, and human justice, right, or physical justice, only sees the actions themselves.
Yes, thank you. We have lots of people following this talk today. We have our friend Stephen from Ireland, the Emerald Island, and also people following us from Brazil, in Dayatuba. Thank you, welcome. Okay, next question. Not even the spirit world or God forgets our misdeeds, do they? We hear God forgives us and forgets our sins a lot, but...
Thank you, Justin, for the question. As we learn from Spiritism, God doesn't have to forget things, right? Because God is the supreme intelligence of the universe. God knows everything. God knows, again, supreme intelligence. So the idea that, God's going to forgive you, God's going to forgive you, right? It's a very small idea. We're diminishing the overall power of God. That's my interpretation of this. But what's important to me is that we are going to be accountable for our actions, no matter what. And our conscience is going to call us, hey, Flavio, you actually, dropped the ball here. You actually, betrayed somebody else there. We're going to see that, because as we evolve, as we progress, we look at those things as some sort of anchors that are really keeping us stuck, right, in the lower zones. So as we like to progress, as we like to move forward, as we like to really evolve, we got to remove those anchors. And the only way to remove those anchors is to really be accountable for our misdeeds, to be accountable, responsible, and really make amends to...
Okay, there is just a minute. He's going to come back. Thank you, everyone. Raquel and Maria that is following us.
And we're back.
Yeah, you know what? It's Halloween. That's the treat for
it's the treat. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm just getting disconnected. Anyways, so I hope you got the part of the answer. What I wanted to wrap this up with was, as we become more accountable for our actions, right, we are going to be the ones really critiquing or really holding ourselves accountable for those things, really driving us to forgive more, to really drive amends, and really bring those folks that we've betrayed, we've dropped the balls, we've really disappointed in the past, so that we can really progress together in a way that we don't become their obsessors in a future life. We see so many obsessors that they linger through incarnations and incarnations without forgiving, without letting go of a situation. And guess what? The very same situation could be or could have been caused by them themselves. So the once we open really the spectrum of our view, of our understanding of the situation, our idea of forgiveness changes. Our really concept of forgiveness changes. In a way, it's not a sign of weakness. It's not that I'm going to forget this. No, it's going to be part of my life. But I decided to forgive. I decided to move on. I decided to say, you know what, I'm not going to hold grudges. I'm not going to have resentment. I'm going to suffer because we're all humans. We all suffer after something does something bad to us. But I will move on. And thanks to Spiritism that opened my mind, I have the tools now to move on. I have the capabilities within me now, aligning with God, with Jesus' gospel, with God's teaching, that will make me a better person if I forgive.
Great. Another question. As a question from Glaucio, as a Spiritist, how to avoid feeling vindicated by thinking that someone who hurt us in this life will suffer consequences in a future life?
Wow, that's a great question. Thank you, Glaucio.
Yeah.
So the way I look at this is, when somebody does something bad to us, okay, that person, inflicted pain. That person inflicted, pain or suffering. It happened, okay? And that person has to really abide or really go through the consequences of resentment, of forgiveness, of really moving on. In the same way that we have when we do these things. So everybody's going to suffer the consequences of their actions. We're not going to, there's no shortcuts, folks. There's no magic pill. There's no shortcut. There's no one literature that's going to know. We're all going to be held accountable for the things that we do. But that consequence or that accountability happens according to the level of our spiritual knowledge. The more we know, and we're still making these basic mistakes, the more accountable we are. That's the difference between going back to divine justice versus human justice. Divine justice sees that in every angle. I'll give a very practical or pragmatic example. If we're born in a very, a balanced life, family, both of our parents are there, we have access to education, to love, to care, a roof, food. We have this great life, and if we make a mistake, it's not going to be the same consequence as if we come from broken families, from the slums, and this without food, without education. It's going to be, everybody's going to be really held accountable based on their understanding of the world of life overall, based on our, spiritual evolution, so to speak. So in this situation, nobody's going to really remove themselves from really following the consequences. I hope that answered the question, Gloucester. If not, forgive me, please. That's how I understood, at least.
Oh, no, this one we did already. There's another.
God's divine justice, yep.
Is it enough not to hate? Should we also exercise forgiveness?
Great question. It is not enough not to hate. Because if I quote Jesus, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Jesus' message asks us to go beyond, folks. The gospel asks us, Christ followers, to go beyond what's being asked by society out there. For society may be enough not to hate. But guess what? If you don't forgive, you're going to feel all that resentment, all that anger, all those physical pains that we've described here before, all those imbalances that's going to cause you more doctor visits, more stress, high blood pressure, obesity. All those things are going to be the consequences of you, of us, not forgiving. So if we want to live well-balanced lives, we have to go beyond us, not just hating, but forgiving instead.
Thank you. Is it okay if we manage to forgive only at a certain point and not being able to forgive everyone?
Is it okay if we manage to forgive only at a certain point? So the way I understood the question is, Nobody's at the same, emotional level, the spiritual level. Sometimes we can forgive things that are very harsh. Sometimes we're not ready yet. So we need to really, some sort of digest those emotions. That's exactly what Dr. Brian Adams talks about in his book, because he says, we might not be able to forgive right away, but everybody's able to forgive with time. So time is a huge tool that's at our fingertips, aligned with what we learned from Spiritism, aligned with what we learned from the science, the research. We are going to be able to forgive, no matter what, everyone in the future. Are we there yet? We might not be there yet. But we can't just say, I'm not there, I can't forgive. No, I'm not there yet. I have to do my part. I have to continue really working myself, bettering myself, augmenting my knowledge, access to readings, access to knowledge, to wisdom, so that I can really put myself in a better place, that I'll be able to forgive everyone all the time, instinctively. Remember what they said about Jesus, right? Jesus asks us that forgiveness has to be unconditional, constant, and in instinct, meaning there's no distinctions, there's no conditions, and it happens every step of the way. Are we there yet? Not yet, but with Jesus' knowledge, we will be there. I'm confident that if we follow his footsteps, we will get there sooner rather than later, folks. I truly believe that.
Great. I don't know if you have, you have another one. How can we reach this stage of forgiveness? We hear cases of several incarnations of a spirit without forgiving the other.
Yeah, I think we touched that a little bit on my previous answer, that we mentioned there's spirits that linger incarnations without being able to forgive an action that somebody did to them in a previous life. Exactly, right? So what I meant by that was, folks, we gotta look for forgiveness with different eyes. We have to understand forgiveness and then really distribute that message to everyone around us, that it's impossible to be happy, to live healthier lives without forgiveness. Even more so when I look at that from the spiritual lens of obsessions. And we've seen them in mediumship meetings where spirits are lingering for many, many incarnations because they have not learned the power of forgiveness from that, first incarnation. Some of them still haven't learned as of today the power of forgiveness. And they could have been good, being a decent human beings, decent incarnate spirits, but they just missed the whole concept of forgiveness. Because as we also learned through Spiritism, the scriptures and Jesus' teachings have been modified through time, and the whole idea of forgiveness, some sort of gotten lost. That's why I like, the pastor Brian Zen so much, because he talks about the most important message that Jesus had left us, even more so that his last words at the cross were, God, forgive, Lord or Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. He's being killed. He's being crucified. And he asked our heavenly creator to forgive everybody because they don't know what they're doing. That's the most important message from the gospel. And as we follow Jesus' teachings, folks, we got to get this. This is important. This is pivotal for our own success. This is pivotal for our own happiness. This is fundamentally important to our own well-being. That's the message of today's talk, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Flavio. I think that was our last question. It was a beautiful talk, very enlightening, inspiring. And it's beautiful also to see your window and see the snow falling behind you. Yeah, yes. There's something right, yes. And we can see the snow falling, the first snow of the year. So next week, stay tuned as well with us. We will have our dear friend John Santos talking to us, and he's going to talk about God and universal cosmic fluid. It's going to be a talk not to be missed as well, okay? And for us to end our presentation today, our talk, once again, we want to thank you, Flavio, for being with us and for talking for having chosen this important topic for us today. And we would like to invite you to do our final prayer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us every Saturday. We will continue doing that. And it's been very enlightening and very helpful for all of us. So I'll see you next week. Flavio.
Thank you. So thank you, folks, once again for the opportunity. Let us be thankful now to our Heavenly Mother and Father God, the Creator of the universe. And by doing so, we'd like to gather and unite our thoughts and minds and hearts in a prayer. Dear God, we're here gathered in Thy name, trying to get a little more knowledge, a little bit more teachings, so we can be better human beings towards others, towards those who come in contact with us. And most importantly, to those that have really provided some wrongdoings to our lives. We understand we're not perfect. We understand we have so much to learn, so much to progress. But we ask all the benefactor spirits, all of our guardian angels, Jesus, our professor, our model and guide, to stay with us, giving us all the love that we need, enlightening our minds, embracing our hearts, giving us the peace, the wisdom, the knowledge that we need to keep going with our lives. We live through such difficult moments, but we should not forget that everything happens for a reason and that you are at the helm, our dear Lord. So we ask you once again to stay with us now and forever. So be it.
Thank you.